to open your Bible to the Gospel of Matthew chapter 4. I guess we'll probably stay in the New Testament tonight solely. We preached out of the Old Testament this morning. Matthew chapter 4. I made some statements this morning concerning what we're studying about, and I'll not go through all of that again tonight, but I do want to do a little bit of review from last Sunday night. If you were not here last Sunday night, that we began a series, a study on personal evangelism, or just witnessing to people one-on-one. And I believe it's something that's very needed. It's something that we fail in many times. I know I do. I can't speak for you. I think most Baptists do fail in just trying to win people to Jesus Christ. There's two main things we focused on last week. I just want to go back over those quickly and then look at our text tonight and try to bring out a thought tonight. The two things we looked at last week was, first of all, why we fail to witness to people individually, why we fail to evangelize people. And I gave you some reasons for that, and spent a little bit of time dealing with it. And one thing is that I think a lot of times we're embarrassed or ashamed to speak of Jesus Christ in front of people that we know maybe would be hostile to that. And then I spoke about fear. A lot of times that fear paralyzes us, that we're afraid of rejection, and or that we're afraid that we're not up to the task. And I think that that silences us as much as anything, that I'm just not up to the task. I'm not able to help them. What if there's questions that I can't answer? What if there's things that they counter? What if there's arguments that they have? And therefore that we allow that to justify us just leaving them alone. And so fear. Another thing I mentioned was failure to recognize it as our duty. I'll just limit it to Baptists. A lot of Baptists just don't realize it's my duty to speak to people about Jesus Christ, and not just to, just speak on general terms, but really to get down to business with people concerning their relationship or lack of relationship with the Lord. I mentioned this, that I think another reason we fail to do is because we fail to see other Baptists, other church members, other brothers and sisters in Christ doing it, don't we? And I spoke about that when I see you, when you're going out and doing what you're supposed to be doing and I'm not doing it, that condemns me. That speaks to my heart. And a lot of times that will cause me to do better and to maybe pick up on those things that I'm lacking. The last thing I mentioned was just a failure to care, just a lack of concern. There's not a whole lot that we can do about that. Or let me rephrase that. If that's the case with you, there's not a whole lot that I can do. I can't cause you to be concerned. I can certainly teach it and allow the Lord to work about your heart. But that's something that you're going to have to get fixed in your own heart and your own mind. We looked at some scriptures last week that showed us our duty to evangelize. We began in the book of Mark. I won't go back there, but began with Jesus telling the disciples to go out into the world and to witness to all men, to take the gospel to every creature. And I brought out that this morning again, that it's not, Jesus never told the world to come to the church to hear the word, but he said that we're to go out into the world. I mentioned this morning again, I'll just reiterate this and we'll move on to our new material tonight, that the main purpose of us coming to church is for the saved. And it's a wonderful thing when a lost person trusts Christ. But the main reason that we come together is to feed the saints, to encourage one another, to help us to see where we're lacking in our lives. And then we go out into the world, and we're strengthened when we come here to go out into the world and to share the good news of Jesus Christ with them. And then to, if they trust Christ, certainly to instill in them the need of coming and joining, following the Lord in baptism and joining the church and to working for Him. So we'll pick up in verse 18 of Matthew chapter 4. I don't think we're going to just be a lengthy study tonight. I'm just going to mainly just deal with one particular topic. But he began in verse 18, and Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. And going on from thence, he saw other two brethren, James the son of Zebedee with John his brother, in a ship with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them, and they immediately left the ship and their father and followed him. Now, tonight I want to deal with and again, just going to keep it very narrow, unless the Lord lead a different direction. But I want to deal tonight with really just what's needed, what's necessary in order to be a soul winner. And there's a lot of things. I'm not going to go through a long list with you tonight. Certainly that you need to be saved if you're going to win somebody else to the Lord. You need to be in fellowship with the Lord. You need to, there's a lot of things that would certainly make you more profitable and more able as a soul winner. We may deal with some of that later on, not tonight. But I want you to notice here that Jesus called these men as they were fishing. And that's what these men knew, was fishing. And he used terminology that they could understand. He said, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Now, being a fisher of fish is very similar to being a fisher of men. And I know I've heard some good sermons on that. That's not what I'm going to try to do tonight. But there's a lot of similarities in fishing for fish and fishing for men. What I want you to see tonight is this, and this is what I want to just narrow down and deal with tonight. That what is of the greatest value to a fisherman? I want you to think about that. Don't answer me. Of everything else in the world, and I'm not talking about family or husband or wife or children or those kind of things. I'm just talking about material things. The greatest value to a fisherman is fish. Would you agree with me tonight? A fisherman desires fish, because if he does not catch fish, then he loses his livelihood. And there's a lot of things that a fisherman can have investments in. There's a lot of things that he can say that that's very valuable to me. A fisherman's boat would be of great value, wouldn't it? I think we'd all agree with that. And don't think about somebody that goes out. I use Brother Jack, he likes to fish. I'm not talking about somebody like Brother Jack that just likes to go out a few times a year and take his boat out and fish. I'm talking about somebody that is doing this for a living. I'm talking about somebody that their livelihood is based upon that. And these men were. That's exactly what they were. They were fishermen, and if they were going to eat, if they were going to provide for their family, they had to catch fish. That boat would be important. And I've seen some big ones. I know some of you have probably seen maybe some of these TV shows that depict fishermen, whether it be whatever kind of species that they were catching. There's a lot of money that they put in to that boat. There's a lot of money they put in to nets. If they're fishing with nets, those nets would be valuable to them. There's other equipment that they need. There's even navigation equipment that they would have on that ship or on that boat. I've even heard this. I assume this is the truth, that in some of the larger fisheries, they even send up planes to locate the fish. And that they'll radio back to the boats and they'll go where those planes have spotted those great schools of fish. Now you think about all of those, and I could go on and on. I don't want to waste all our time dealing with this. But you think about all the investment that a fisherman would have. But all of those things are purchased. All of those things are invested in for one reason. It's not to drive up down the road and say, look at my boat. It's not to go out into the bay and say, look at my nets. It's not to go brag to your friends about this sonar equipment that you have, is it? The purpose of all those things is for one purpose. That's to catch fish. So it's fish. That's what they're after. That's what is most dear to them. That's what has the greatest value to a fisherman, is fish. Let me fix this right quick. So the question that I'd like to ask to you tonight, Jesus told them that if they would follow him, that he would make them fishers of men. I want us to think about this, is how much value do you place on people? That's what I want to think about tonight. How much value do you place on people? These men place great value in fish. They knew a lot about fish, didn't they? They studied fish. They talked about fish. No doubt they talked to one another about maybe the newest methods to catch fish, or where the fish were located. Or maybe there's different kind of nets. The net that would be most successful in catching fish. We go on and on and on, but they place so much value upon fish. Now, I think that we can gauge the value that we place on people by just asking ourselves the question, how many people have we tried to win to the Lord? How many people have we really tried to catch? What if the fisherman, he bought his boat, he got his nets, he got his navigation equipment, he got everything he needed, and he never went out in the water? Would you say that he cared about fishing? No. What about us? We've been equipped, we've been called, we've been commissioned to go, and we talk about it a lot of times, but how many times do we actually just get out in the water and start fishing? I have to say that I failed in that. Nothing matters more to God than people. Do you realize that? What did Jesus say? Matthew chapter 10, he was talking about the sparrow. And he said that 2 sparrows are sold for 1 farthing, 5 sparrows are sold for 2 farthings. And yet he said that not one of them falls to the ground without me allowing that to happen. I'm paraphrasing that. But he went on to make this statement. He said, "Ye are of more value than many sparrows." Jesus put a value on people, and he said that ye, one person, is more valuable to him than many sparrows. Nothing matters more to him than people do. Brother Nathan, Sister Brittany, we ate lunch with them today, and they had no idea that I was going to be dealing with this tonight, but we got to talking about at lunch, sitting around the table after lunch, of the value that people today put on animals. Most of the time, there's more value put on animals than put on people. And this was used at the dinner table. I was eating it up because I said, man, that's good stuff for the message tonight. But one of the, I think, either my wife or Sister Brittany made the statement that you can report to the authorities child abuse in a home, and it may be weeks or months before they investigate it. But you call and report that an animal's being abused. They'll be there before you can hang the phone up, won't they? You can kill an unborn child, but don't you kill an animal. Don't you shoot a dog. And I'm not saying tonight that we're to be cruel to them, and we're not. That we're to be good stewards of God's creation. But I want to say this, and I want you to understand this tonight. God does not care about your little pets like He cares about people. He just doesn't. It's people is what God is concerned about. That's what He puts value on. Your cute little dog, and we all got them. I said I would never let a cat into my house. I got one. Don't look down at me because I got a cat in the house. But I'm going to blame that on my wife, and there's a good story behind that. But she made a promise one night, not knowing that it was going to come true. And anyway, we got a cat that comes in the house sometimes. I don't say lives in the house, but does come in the house sometimes. And I know we get attached to those things, but and our cat's name's Jack. He is not created in the image of God. And your cat's not created in the image of God. And Jethro is not created in the image of God. And I could name some of your animals. They're not. But mankind is created in the image of God. And mankind matters to God. Mankind's important to God. Every individual is important to God. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter what background they come from. It doesn't matter what nationality that they are. That they are important to God. As a matter of fact, that I thought about this, and I went back and read it this afternoon just to be sure. But in Genesis chapter 9, verse 3, as Noah and his sons came off the ark, this is a statement that God made for them. He said, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. You know why God created animals? For us to eat them. Now there's some we don't eat. There's some that we look at other people that do eat them and go, man, how could you eat certain ones? But God, that's why He created them. And I understand this, that we don't eat all of them. There's certain, and even in the Bible, not just under the law, but He said there's only certain conditions that you're to eat an animal. One of those is kind of almost like this. You make sure you're the one that kills it, you know. Don't just happen up on something that's died. He said don't eat it, because there may be something wrong with it. Certainly that was for health reasons. But I know that He created animals to keep things in balance. We know there's a food chain, and there's a top and a bottom, and all of that, and all that's kept in balance. But let's just keep our priorities where they need to be. They need to be on people, don't they? And I'm going to get off the animals. Our priority needs to be on people. Investing in people. I wonder how many times we invest in things that really don't amount to a hill of beans. Don't we? We put our time, we put our efforts, we put our fortunes, we put our savings in a lot of things that really eternally just don't matter. But I want to take some scriptures tonight, and I want to show us how that Jesus is the great example of loving people and being interested in people. We're never going to win people till we get concerned about people, till we have a burden for people, till we see that people are important. Turn over, if you would, just in this same chapter. It's just a few verses below this. I want to read some statements that Jesus, or that are made about Jesus there in Matthew chapter 4. But I heard a minister make this statement I was at a deacon ordination several weeks ago, and I'm not calling the man's name. He's well respected. You know him very well. But he made this statement. He sort of started the message like this, and he preached along the same lines what I'm dealing with tonight. But when he said this, I just wanted to I just want to crawl under the bench. I just want to get up and leave because he proved it, and he got across the point that this is true. But here's what he said. He said, it's unchristian not to be a people person. Because I make the statement sometimes, I'm just not a people person. And naturally, I'm not a people person. I was about as shy as Kendall when I was that age. I am not a people person naturally. But he said it's unchristian not to be a people person. Ooh. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he's really right. Jesus was a people person. And we're called to be people, I guess. Every one of us ought to be a people person. We ought to have a burden for people. Verse 23 of the same chapter. I just want to go through just a few passages here. I'm not going to maybe just spend a lot of time on each one of them. But I want you to see just how involved in people that Jesus was. In Matthew chapter 4, verse 23, it says, Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. And his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought unto him all sick people that were taken with divers diseases and torments, and those that were possessed with devils, and those which were lunatic, and those that had the palsy, and he healed them. Rather than talking about the miracles of Jesus right here, I want us to think about the kind of people that surrounded Jesus. I think we miss that sometimes, Brother Wilford. We know Jesus was always surrounded with people, but what kind of people was he surrounded with, or surrounded by? We just read it. And they brought unto him all sick people that were taken with divers diseases. They didn't bring people with chicken pox to Jesus. They didn't bring people with a cold to Jesus. What kind of diseases was it that they had when they were brought to Jesus? It was incurable diseases, wasn't it? It was diseases, no doubt, that probably caused them to maybe have malformations in their body. It would cause them to be undesirable in a lot of ways. You remember the lady with the issue of blood? That's not real desirable. But that's the kind of people that he was surrounded with, sick people. They that were taken with divers, all kind of diseases, and Brother Wade, and torments. These were things that tormented people. And those which were possessed with devils. How many of you like to be around demon-possessed people? None of us. They scare us, don't they? They get on our nerves. That's the kind of people that Jesus was with. And those that were lunatic. Lunatic, that means crazy, moonstruck. Comes from the lunatic comes from the word lunar, dealing with the moon. Literally, they were crazy. They didn't have their marbles. And those that had the palsy, the paralytics, those that were paralyzed, and he healed them. You see, he was the only one that could heal them. And so he was surrounded by those kind of people all the time. And it says, and there followed him great multitudes of people from Galilee and from Decapolis, from Jerusalem, from Judea and beyond Jordan. How many people followed Jesus? The preacher was a great multitude. There had to have been a few hundred with him. Remember when he fed the multitude? One time there was 5,000 men besides the women and children. Another time, 3,000 besides the women and children? If there were 5,000 men, 4/5 of them had wives, there's another 4,000, 9,000, some of them had kids. At any given time, there may have been 15 or 20,000 people around Jesus. When did you hear him complain? He didn't, did he? Why? Because he was interested in people. He came to earth to save people. People were important to him. He understood the value of every soul that he encountered. Go over to chapter 8 of this same book. And by the way, that in what we just read, that he went through the regions of Galilee. By the way, Galilee was looked down upon as an area that people were relatively uneducated, people were poor, people were wicked, people were unlearned. That's where Jesus was. He was with those kind of people. Because remember, he said, the whole don't need the doctor. They don't need the physician. Those as well don't, put in our terms, those as well don't need the doctor, but those that's sick. Chapter 8, verse 1, when he was come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, there came a leper and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And Jesus put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be thou clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Is there anything that jumps out in this passage to you? Jesus touched a leper. Question. When was the last time anybody had touched that man? You ever thought about that? When's the last time he was touched? It may have been years since anybody, any human being, had touched him. Now, in my family growing up, we weren't very huggy type people. But every now and then it's good to be touched, isn't it? Sometimes you just need a hug. Sometimes you just need to touch somebody. And I know there's a right way and a wrong way. And you understand what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the right way. There's something about somebody touching you that's comforting, isn't it? But this man hadn't been touched. Nobody would touch him. In fact, that he would go by and say, unclean, unclean, and people go away. Nobody had even been in the proximity of him. But Jesus came and he touched him. You reckon there's still people like that today? Say, nope, there's not leprosy. I'm not talking about leprosy. You reckon there's people that, Brother Willie, it's been a long time since anybody said anything nice to them? Probably so. May have been a long time since somebody stuck their hand out and said, it's good to see you. Shook their hand. There's a man, I'm ashamed, I've not talked to him. A lot of times we just don't want to get involved with people, do we? Because we don't know what it'll lead to. But there's a man that lives, I don't know if he lives under the bridge there or maybe in the woods, but between my house and Wiggins on Highway 26, you go across Red Creek, and there's a man, he's got a long beard, and he lives somewhere in that area. I assume he lives there under that bridge, but it's out in the country. And what is it, 3 miles to town, 3 or 4 miles to town from there? And every morning you see him, he's walking to town, and he sits at the Chevron in Wiggins. He just sits there. And sometime in the afternoon, he'll walk back home. And I was talking with the deputy sheriff in the county some time back. Actually, I was riding with him, and we passed that guy. And I asked him, I said, what do you know about that guy? He said, well, you know, when he first showed up, we figured out who he was. We ran the records, and he does not have a record. He does not have a criminal record. As far as I know, he just doesn't have anywhere to live. He doesn't cause trouble. You know, a lot of times I'll see him, and I never have stopped to talk to him. I wonder the last time somebody stopped and just really cared for him. I wonder if he's saved. I don't know. But Jesus reached out and he touched that man. And said immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Jesus said, see thou tell no man, but go thy way, show thyself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. If I remember correctly, this man actually went and began to share with everybody what Jesus had done for him. It meant something to him. The statement is made, and I understand the context of it. It's at the judgment of the nations in Matthew chapter 25. But Jesus would make the statement unto those people. He said he put some on the right hand, some on the left, and those on the right hand, he separated the sheep from the goats, is what he said. Those that he separated on the right hand, he said, you know, that I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison. Let me flip over there. I'm going to get it backwards. I was hungered and you gave me meat. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. Naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came unto me. What did they ask him? They kind of got a confused, I'll just look at it like this. They kind of get a confused look and go, when did we do all this? In fact, the question is, when saw we thee a stranger, took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? When saw thee we sick or in prison and came unto thee? Lord, we don't remember any of this. And what was the answer? When you've done it unto the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. You know what Jesus is saying? That when we reach out to that one that's a burden to us, that we're concerned about, when we reach out to them, he said, we're reaching out to him. You've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. And there was a great reward for that they did. And so think about it that way, that when we take the time to be concerned about somebody, it's as if that we're doing that to the Lord. We're doing that for the Lord. Mark chapter 6. 2 more places. One more after this. Mark chapter 6. Verse 30, and the apostles gathered themselves together unto Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said unto them, come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going. They had no leisure so much as to eat. So notice the situation. They're going to go off by themselves for a while. That there's so many coming and going. They've got no time to relax, no time to eat. And they departed into a desert place by ship privately. And the people saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran afoot thither out of all the cities, and outwent them, and came together unto him. I thought about this a lot. Jesus was trying to get away with his disciples for a little while, really for their sakes. But the people saw him leave. And when he got to where they were going, when he got to that restful place, what did he find? Brother Kevin, they were already there. The people had beat him there. You know, what would most of us have done? Will y'all please go away? I've just got to have some time. I got to have some me time. Come back later. That's enough. We'll do it. Come back tomorrow. But verse 34 said, Jesus, when he came out and saw much people, was moved with compassion toward them. Because they were sheep not having a shepherd, he began to teach them many things. And when the day was far spent, his disciples came unto him and said, this is a desert place, now the time is far spent, send them away. They may go into the country round about to the villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. I wonder if the disciples were really concerned about the people, or were they concerned more about themselves here? It's a good excuse. You know, it's supper time. They don't have anything to eat. Send them away. We're starving, right? But Jesus didn't send them away. He said, you give them to eat. And of course, we know that that's the time that he would take those 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and he would command them to sit down, and that he would feed them. And it says that they would take up 12 baskets full, and they that did eat were about 5,000 men. It was all about people. It's about reaching people. One more place, Luke chapter 8. Or Mark chapter 5. Just flip back one chapter. That'd be a better place to read. Maybe get the point across a little bit better. They're both dealing with the same account. I mentioned the woman with the issue of blood just a minute ago. I want to just deal with one thing concerning her, and then we'll close. If we're going to be a fisher of men, we're going to have to value people as Jesus valued people. How much do you value people? They mean anything to you? Where do you put your efforts in? That doesn't amount to a whole lot. Mark chapter 5. I don't want to deal with all of this for time's sake, but verse 28. For she said, if I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. Straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body she was healed of that plague. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, who touched my clothes? And his disciples said unto him, thou seest a multitude thronging thee, and sayest thou, who touched me? You ever thought about the tone in which they said this? Jesus turned around and said, who touched my clothes? They basically said, are you kidding me? Look at all the people here. There's people on every side of you. There's people thronging you. And you expect us to figure out who it is that touched you? Of course, that Jesus would look around to see her that had done this thing. Of course, the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. He said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of thy plague. Why'd you read this, preacher? I read this to help you to, again, just to drive home the fact that Jesus was always surrounded by people. Not just a few people, not maybe just an audience like we have tonight, but everywhere he went, that he was surrounded by people who had a need. They had a spiritual need. A lot of them had physical needs. He desired to meet their spiritual needs. Sometimes all they would let him meet was their physical need, but he desired to meet their spiritual need. Tonight, how much value do you place upon people? How important are people to you? Are they really important to you? Do they really mean a whole lot to you? If we're going to be Christ-like, we're going to have to be people. I'm going to have to be a people person if I'm going to be what Jesus Christ wants me to be. So, preacher, that's not helping me a whole lot in witnessing to people. Well, we're going to get into some of those things in the weeks ahead. But we need to see the value of people. The value of people. We'll ask for a verse of a song tonight.